Hey guys, welcome back to Planet Mithril, and we're back with you today with another Let's Talk Tabletop video. Today we are exploring Gimli, son of Gloin, the dwarven tank of a hero, the absolute wrecking ball with an axe, and the undisputed Lord of the Beard. So without further delay, let's talk tabletop. When we started doing these with the first one with Aragorn, we did say we were going to work our way at least through the Fellowship heroes and see how the series has done and how you guys enjoyed it. And then we'll carry on from there and explore some of the other characters in Middle-earth. So we are continuing our journey with the Fellowship today with Gimli, son of Gloin. So where do we start with Gimli? He is a hero of valor. First off, his stat lines are as follows. He is movement 5, which is fairly consistent across all dwarf warriors and heroes. He is fight value 6 with a 4 up to hit, so he's getting those throwing axes out on a 50-50 chance. As with most heroes, he is strength 4, so he's got a fair bit of hitting power behind him. But where we see a massive change in his stat line here compared to other heroes, particularly in the Fellowship as well, is that he is defense 8. So he is a solid, tough nut to crack. He is not going down easy. That is something that's fairly consistent across pretty much all the dwarf heroes in the Moria and Kingdom of Khazad-dûm army list. But defense 8 really gives him some proper stay power on the battlefield. He is 2 attacks standard. He has some ways of getting up to 3 attacks, which we'll explore in his special rules in a moment. With 2 wounds, courage 6, with 3 might, 2 will, and 2 fate. So as we say, he is a hero of valor, which means he can lead up to 15 warriors in his warband, which is only really relevant when he's in the Moria Khazad-dûm army list. As that and the Fellowship are the only 2 army lists he can be a part of, and he cannot lead a warband in the Fellowship list. So Gimli, he has heavy dwarven armor, which is what gives him his defense 8 on his stat line. He is equipped also with a Master Forged 2-handed axe. Now this is super solid, because with the Master Forged 2-handed axe means you do not suffer the -1 when you're rolling for a 2-handed strike. So Gimli is swinging in with this axe at strength 4, fight value 6, going 2-handed. Without the -1, with 3 might, he's probably going to get that 6 to push that combat through. And then he is wounding on super low numbers. He's a whirling dervish with his axes. He's an absolute wrecking ball when it comes to axe work. He is also equipped with 2 axes and throwing axes. So not only can he tear it up in combat, if he's out of combat or for whatever reason can't make it into any of the combats around him, he can sit there and throw an axe and hopefully pick off a key orc that's in a really unfortunate space at any given point. He has 2 heroic actions available to him, which is slightly less than we're used to seeing on heroes at the moment. They all just kind of play into his absolute ability on the tabletop just to wreck utter face and cleave things apart with a variety of axes. He's got an axe for every occasion. According to this stat line, he's got an axe for every day of the week. But yes, he has heroic strike, which means he can increase his fight value to go toe-to-toe with some of those bigger, nastier baddies like Sauron and Balrogs and trolls and whatnot. He also has heroic strength as well, which means he can up his strength to, again, push through some hits on some of those bigger, nastier baddies that he may come up against. The only bit of equipment he can be given is an elven cloak, which gives him a little bit of protection at range. Strength 2 and Strength 3 bows are going to have a real tough time trying to crack him at range, and just to be able to give him that elven cloak to melt him into the background is just going to make him that much harder to deal with. And I think that's probably a key thing with Gimli is because he's only movement 5, as are most dwarfs. Getting him into combat is going to be a slight issue. Heroic marches will help if he can be next to Aragorn or around somebody who's got access to heroic march. So it's keeping him safe at range before you can get him into where he needs to go, which is where I think the delicate balancing act comes with Gimli. There's a couple of special rules available to him. The first one is Axes of the Dwarf, which means he gets the choice every combat as to whether he fights with 2 or 3 axes every turn. As we discussed previously, if he fights with 2 axes, he's got his Master Forged 2-handed axe, doesn't suffer the -1, and is putting out some serious hurt on the models that he decides to wound after that. If he elects not to use his 2-handed axe, he can instead use an axe in both hands. And if he does this, they are single-handed axes, so he doesn't get the bonus to wound or suffer any -1. But he does increase his stat line to 3 attacks. So suddenly you've got a strength 4, defense 8, 3 attack, fight value 6, powerhouse, just absolutely wrecking face into battle lines of orcs, goblins, uruks, whatever you want to put in front of him. And this is really quite good because it gives Gimli that flexibility to switch between, I need to do some really powerful solid hits and wound something that's quite a big threat. And then the next turn he can sit there and he can go, cool, right, well this flank now needs thinning out, so we're going to run in with 3 attacks and see if we can do a little bit of extra thinning work to make it easier for the units around him. So he's got quite a lot of flexibility when it comes to his role on the battlefield, which is really good. You don't see many models that can actually do that. Quite a lot of them are kind of almost pigeonholed into like one role. As we discussed with Legolas, his role is to kind of thin at range and then kind of just interfere and harass in combat, whereas Gimli can turn his hand to either taking out some of those big threats with his Master Force two-handed axe, or just thinning the ranks of the enemy every turn, being the whirling dervish with 3 axes that he can be. As we also discussed in the Legolas Let's Talk Tabletop, there is a counter rule to Legolas's final count, 42, and Gimli has the other half of this rule. It is titled, I myself am sitting pretty on 43, which is, again, another reference to the kill count Legolas and Gimli have throughout the films. So this basically boils down to, if at any point Legolas has got more kills than Gimli, which he's likely to, especially early game when Legolas is firing 3 shots into the enemy ranks, then Gimli gets +1 to wound when making strikes in combat, which, when you think about the cascading nature of Gimli's attacks and what he can do on the tabletop, is hideous. It can be so powerful. This synonymizes super well with a load of his other rules, and yeah, it's really, really fun to get going. And again, like, it synergizes really well because Legolas is probably going to have these early door kills, so it gives Gimli, when he finally gets to that combat that he wants to get to, he's got an extra bit of hitting power to then cleave through, which then gives Legolas the reversal of that, so he then becomes more effective and can then bounce the rule back and forward between the two of them, kind of as you see fit. The only caveat to this, it's not always under your control. You can't always guarantee when you're going to kill something, so you might end up, if you're running them both, having one with a bonus that doesn't need it at a time when the other one really does need it. So it's a little bit of a balancing act, potentially, just to kind of guide it the way you want it to go, and just mitigates any danger of any rebuttal from the enemy doing some serious harm to your heroes. Well, that is Gimli's stat line and rules talked for a little bit. We're going to talk a little bit on his pros and cons. As we said, he is defense 8, so he is not going anywhere. He is hard to shift. You can park him on an objective and he can pretty much single-handedly hold that for a good little while, especially while he's still got his full reserves of might, will and fate. He's not going to be going anywhere anytime soon. He might struggle a little bit with monsters, particularly if there's more than one, a couple of cave trolls on him or a couple of Mordor trolls decide that Gimli is their target they really want to get hold of. But I think he is one of the very few heroes that I can think of, particularly in this fellowship list, that can go toe-to-toe with one of these big Mordor trolls, troll chieftains, and actually be really effective at doing wounds to it at the same time. The only other one I can think of that can do this any better than Gimli is Aragorn with Anduril, and that's because you're wounding things on 4+ all round rather than just native rules. You're paying for that ability, whereas Gimli has it inherent on him, just had to set it up right and make sure it works out in his favour as he's fighting these big monsters, which is, you know, again, that balancing act. Also, given his high defence value, he doesn't suffer too much when his resources start to dwindle, because he's going to be sitting there with his defense 8. Even the strength 4, strength 5 models are going to need 6s to punch through his defense 8. Whereas other heroes from this fellowship list, such as Aragorn, Legolas, Gimli, they've all got native defense 5, which means the strength 4s are wounding them on 5. So they're a little bit more fragile when it comes to taking a hit, whereas Gimli can kind of just stand there and just be like, and what? As we said, dwarf 5-inch move. It can be a little bit difficult to get him in position if he starts falling behind and the combat starts happening without him being there. He may struggle to really make use of his target prioritization ability as well as he could. The flip side of that is the Fellowship could just kind of run forward at the same pace as Gimli, but then you're slowing down the entire rest of the Fellowship for the sake of one dwarf, and possibly putting yourself at more of a disadvantage if your Fellowship members who can get there in time aren't there in time for the sake of kind of all going in together. That being said, you can make for quite a nice little 1-2 punch in the right scenario if you run in with Aragorn and Boromir first off, cut through the first couple of ranks, and then by the time the counter-attackers come, Gimli's coming in fresher and helping to support. So it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other. He's slow, so he can't necessarily always get there, and is probably more at risk because he's then vulnerable to shooting attacks and magic and big siege engines that can do a lot of damage to him first off. but then on the other side of that, he can be a nice kind of second wave into a rank of orcs or uruk that is overpowering Boromir and Aragorn and other heroes in the Fellowship that have got to the combat earlier. So again, it's scenario and army dependent, how effective Gimli is in regard to his movement and how quickly he can get into the action. Going back to the monster side of things, him being only strength 4, as is usual with other heroes, does leave him vulnerable again to brutal power attacks, particularly rend from enemy monsters. So if he does manage to lose that fight against a monster, they'll be wounding him against his strength, which again is only the same as most other heroes in the army book. So that's one way by which you can get round his defense 8, because even the strength 7 troll is going to be wounding him on 5s, which is insane. But by rending, you'll be doing more damage because you'll be wounding on his strength, and that's only strength 4, so you only need 3s to wound him. So that's quite a tricky way by which monsters can get around Gimli and shift him off of something they want him to shift off of. So that's something to be aware of if you're running Gimli yourself. Okay, well, that was our Let's Talk Tabletop for Gimli. We really hope you guys enjoyed this video. We will be moving on to Boromir of Gondor next time round, and then after that we'll be moving on to Gandalf, and then moving on to the Hobbits. Painting tutorials, we've got loads of these lined up. We have got Rangers of the North, we've got Mordor Uruk-hai, we've got Haradrim Warriors, we've got Faramir's Rangers or Rangers of Gondor, and we have King Alisar himself, just to name but a few who are on the tabletop currently being painted for your viewing pleasure. So we will have one of these out for you next week for our painting tutorial. But yes, thank you guys so much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you enjoy the content. Every little bit helps, and we've got so far, with all the support you guys have been giving us, we cannot thank you enough. But yes, until next time guys, we hope you enjoyed this video, and happy hobbying. Take care guys. Bye bye.